Okay, good morning everyone. Thanks for having me, very delighted to be here. My name is Massine Yanat. I will quickly introduce myself, give you some quick introduction about the company I represent here, and then we can attack the topic. So I have a background in quality and sustainability. I've been with SGD Pharma for 5 years now. I started in the headquarters in Paris as a sustainability analyst, and thanks to my background in quality, I then rotated through the different quality departments in the plants that we have in Europe. So SGD Pharma is a company that manufactures glass bottles and vials for pharmaceutical applications. So some key figures is 3,000 employees, a turnover of more than 400 million euros, 5 manufacturing sites. We have 2 in France, 1 in Germany, 1 in India, and 1 in China. So this topic, the topic I will talk about is about the decarbonization of the pharma glass industry. It's not really related, I hope it's the right presentation though. Yeah, it is. Okay, so the content of the presentation. So first of all, I will give you some elements of context to put everything in place, to put the pieces of the puzzle together. Then we'll look at the main sources of carbon emissions within the glass process, and also the carbon footprint of the pharma glass industry. So this is not focused on my company only, this is like industry-wide approach, all right? Then we have the initiatives to decarbonize. What are the options to decarbonize the activity, the processes, from R&D, from what are the solutions? And finally, we have also a case study on the third part. We'll look at a case study of a successful decarbonization case. And then we'll have the challenges and future outlook. How does the future look like? So industry overview, we'll look at some elements of context. So history. Glass is linked to human civilization. Born from sand and fire, it's one of the oldest materials used by mankind. So the glass is thought to have been discovered in Mesopotamia, in modern-day Iraq, 4.5 thousand years ago, and the first glass crafts were discovered in Egypt 3,000 years ago. Here you can see some glass bottles from the Romans, basically. Even the Romans, at the 1st century AD, used to use glass to contain incense, perfume, and even medicine at the time. So one of the favorite aspects, what I like the most about glass, what makes me passionate about it, it's at the same time low technology, because mankind has known how to make glass for such a long time, and high tech, if you look at the benefits and the level of purity and stability and performance that glass has reached today. So a glass bottle is a barrier, it's a protection. It protects the drug product against its environment, but it also protects the environment against the drug product, which are sometimes very aggressive. So some of the key benefits: glass is inert, it means that it's chemically stable and inactive. It is transparent, which allows a good inspection of the content, looking for any trace of contamination, of defects, of non-conformity. So it allows inspection of the drug product. It is temperature resistant in the way that it covers a wide range of temperature, from cryonics to deperogenation, as long as you don't move too fast in the temperature to avoid thermal shock. It's easy to sterilize, meaning that it's suitable for the pharmaceutical decontamination systems, radiation, deperogenation, and so on. It is also UV resistant when we talk about amber glass, because it protects the drug against light. And finally, glass has zero permeability. So here you can see from the Corning glass, from the Corning Museum, this is some history about glass container containing medicine to today's result. So that's for element of context and history. Now we look at the picture, today's picture. How does the pharma glass industry look like today? So glass products include tubing, vials, samples, syringes, and cartridges for all kinds of applications: nasal, oral, for parenteral applications, and infusion. So here you can see in terms of market share by product type. So half the market is taken by ampoules, while the two next main products are bottles and vials, so which have different processes, molded glass process and tubular glass process, as we will see. Now, compared to other types of packaging, of primary and secondary packaging in the pharma industry, glass occupies 15% of the market share. So the top one is the plastics and polymers still. And in terms of growth, in terms of market size and growth, so glass represented 6 billion in 2022 with a CAGR of 6-8% for the next 7 years. And what are the market drivers? So with the pandemic, we had an increased demand for vaccine, also injectable drugs, biologics, and the rising prevalence of chronic disease, which also is a drive for growth. And finally, the growing awareness of glass packaging benefits. This is the first piece of the puzzle. Now you know about the glass industry, the glass itself. The second piece of the puzzle is the global context, global warming. Why do we need to decarbonize? Because there is a collective problem from humanity due to the industrial activities. So carbon emission from human activity is provoking a fast change in our climate. So a lot of global initiatives are tackling that issue, that collective global issue, such as the Kyoto Protocol and the COP21 Protocol, ratified by almost every country, which target a net zero emissions by 2050. We also have some national, regional, international regulations that goes in that same direction. So with climate change, we also have acute physical risk and chronic physical risk that can also jeopardize the business. So it's not only for the feelings, but it's also a risk, operational risk. Now that we have the two pieces of the puzzle put together, we need to answer the question, why decarbonize? What are the drivers for change? So the glass industry is a major source of CO2 emissions, of GHG emissions, as it represents 1 to 2% of the global industrial emissions. This encompasses not only the pharma glass, but also food and beverages, cosmetics. So pharma glass is just a part of that. Then we have the pharma glass industry consumed in a very energy-intensive business in the way that it consumes a lot of energy to melt the glass, as we will see in depth later. And the drivers faced by the industry right now are in nature regulatory, business, investor. So the first one, the regulatory drive. So we have emerging regulations everywhere, not only on the national level, but also on the regional, international level. So in Europe, for instance, we have the emission trading scheme, so with carbon quotas reduction, which can get very pricey if you emit a lot of carbon. We also have the EU Fit to 55, the target to reduce the net emissions by 55% by 2050. And we have also all kinds of emerging regulations in Australia, in China, in India, in Canada, EU, and United States that all focuses on packaging. So I like this picture because of the visual impact it carries. You know, this is all the countries that have either ratified or signed the Paris Agreement. So even the usually non-aligned country with the international policies are on board, except Greenland, which is the true axis of evil here. Another drive is business. So more customers' expectations with criteria for supplier selections. So what we have seen in our industry is that more and more pharma players are interested in reducing their carbon footprint. If you look at the big pharma companies, you can see that as part of their global carbon footprint, only 20% around is related to their direct operations. The huge part of the carbon footprint comes from the value chain, from the supplier, from the packaging, and from the end of life of the drug products. So this is why 9 out of 10 of the top pharma companies have reduction targets and are engaging the entire supply chain. We've seen a huge growth in terms of requests from our customers since 2020, 2017. So this is really a confirmed trend, I would say. Also, it's a business argument in the way that it's a differentiation against the competition. The first one to move will be, the first one to adapt will be the ones to survive. So that's for the business case. Now for the financial approach, the financial drive. So we have the energy price uncertainties, especially for gas, fossil fuels, with a global context, a geopolitical context, what is happening in Ukraine. We have also the, so I said, customers were more and more interested in reducing their carbon footprint, but recently we've seen even investors are interested in that, asking for targets to reduce interest rates. So that's a very significant thing. We have new financial impacting laws like energy tax in France, and we have the volatility of the carbon price, which can get very expensive for business, especially energy-intensive business. That's for the financial argument. Now, for the societal argument, we need to be attractive as an employer. You know, new graduates try to make sense, to find a job that makes sense to them. Money is necessary, but not sufficient anymore. So they try to find, you know, a way to balance their values to their lifestyle, to their work. Same goes with the group image and reputation. And also the public and employees have expectation. Nobody wants to work for an unethical company, you know. That's for the societal drive. And finally, the weather risk. So as I said, with climate change, we have risk to interrupt the business due to chronic risk and acute physical risk. Floods, weather events, you know, working in a glass plant when it's 45 degrees outside, it's tough, okay? And nobody wants to do that. So these are the 5 main drivers for change that make the industry wants to decarbonize its activities. Now, I will present shortly Hello, hello. Yeah. Okay, now I will present shortly the glass process, an overview of the glass process and the main sources of CO2 emissions. So this is a simple view of the glass process. So 5 main steps from batching, melting, forming, inspection, and packing. So the melting and forming step happen at the hot end of the process when the glass is hot, while the inspection step happen at the cold end. So we start with the batching. So raw materials are received through trucks. They are loaded into silos, weighted, and then conveyed into the furnace to be weighted and then conveyed to the furnace to be melted in an homogeneous melt. Then the molten glass travels through a feeder that then goes to the forming machine, so transforming the glass drops into glass bottles. I will show you a video about that. The temperature variation between that step, the furnace, and the forming machine is extreme. So the glass, you can imagine, is full of stress and full of tensions that needs to be released. This is why every bottle goes through the annealing layer, where the heating curve and the cooling curve is controlled. Then the glass goes to a clean room environment, isolate clean room environment, where 100% of the bottles are automatically inspected. The machines are looking for all kinds of defects, from container closure integrity to dimensions to cosmetics. So all bottles have to go through that process. And finally, the bottles are packed, automatically packed to avoid by machines, and palletized to avoid human interactions and to guarantee reproducibility. So that's for the molded glass process. And we will see that most 80 to 90% of the emissions, of the direct emissions from these operations, come from the melting and the forming. So this is why the efforts need to be invested. Now for the tubular glass process. The tubular glass process is very different in the way that here the raw materials are the tubes already manufactured by other companies. So the tubes are glass canes, glass canes that are converted into vials, into ampoules in the forming step. We look into that here. After the forming, we have also an annealing to release the stress from the glass, We have the decoration put it here, and everything added on the vials. Here we have the final inspection and packing, also in a clean room environment. So for the forming stage, burners are used to part the tube, so to cut and set the vial height. Then we have a forming stage, or we already have quality controls, 100% online camera inspection on shoulder, neck, mouth, and body diameter of the vials. So this is the first also quality control while the vials are being produced. And then we have the bottom glazing, so heating, glazing, and cooling the vial. So that's just an overview, so we understand what we're talking about here. Is any of you familiar with the glass process to some extent? Yeah? Okay. Okay. So now I would like to show you, so we said that the melting step was really the most important in terms of carbon emissions. So we'll look at that here. So the melting furnace, it's advanced furnace design, operate at temperature up to 1600 degrees. The furnace melts the raw materials over a 24-hour period to ensure an homogeneous melt through gravity and convection. So this happens along, 24 hours period. And just an example, when we rebuild or refurnish a furnace, it takes up to 2 to 3 weeks to reach the perfect temperature, the 1600 degrees. So this is massive, and this is extremely, extremely hot. This is what happens inside the furnace. So the spots you see here are the unmelted raw materials. So this happened along a 24-hour period. And then the molten glass is delivered through feeders into the forming machines. That looks like that. So we'll let it run another time. So I can comment on that. So here you have the glass drops cut by the shears, delivered through the delivery system into the molds, where the bottles are formed following 2 kinds of process. We call it blow and blow or press and blow. And then when the final bottom, the final shape of the bottom is given to the bottle, it is conveyed on the conveyor line. So that's for the main sources of GHG emissions. So 80% of the carbon emissions come from the combustion of natural gas used to melt glass. The other 20% comes from the melting of the carbonated materials. So now we've seen the main sources of carbon emissions. We can look at the initiatives to decarbonize. What are the levers of action? How to address this process and how to improve it. So we have different ways, as I will cover it, different options to decarbonize. We will focus on the furnace technology, as the furnace represents up to 90% of the direct emissions of the operations. So this is really where the efforts must be put. And then we'll show a case study. This picture was taken in our Type 1 glass plant in Normandy, where they use eco-grazing to mow the lawn. To show the efforts to decarbonize are really global, you know. It's not so significant, I would say, compared to the melting process, but it's a sign that is part of the DNA of glass makers, you know. So here, what are the decarbonization options? The first one is the energy source. So we need to use energy coming from electricity coming from low carbon sources like renewable energies or coming from the nuclear grid. Depending where you are when you use your electricity, where your electricity comes from, it has different emission factors. If you use electricity in China, for instance, or in a country that uses coal, your electricity will have a high emission factors. It's the same electricity, but which emits a lot of emissions, emits a lot of GHGs. On the contrary, if you buy your electricity in France or in a country where the nuclear infrastructure are strong, then you have a low emission factors. So this is the first option, is to use an energy source with low emissions factors. The second one is regarding energy performance and heat recovery. So, So energy performance and heat recovery. So that includes, for instance, improving the furnace design and operations. This includes using advanced materials for the walls, for the furnace walls, refractories, optimizing the combustion and melting processes, controlling the temperature and pressure, minimizing air filtration. One example of that is that we use the oxy-fuel technology to heat, to melt the glass. So oxy-fuel technology uses pure oxygen instead of air combustion, which can reduce energy consumption by 30% and emissions by up to 75%. The second approach here is the recovering of waste heat. This refers to capturing and reusing the heat from the flue gas, furnace cooling system, and annealing layer for operating the combustion. Then we have the raw materials and processes. So here we work on the machine efficiency, on the use of decarbonated materials for type 3 glass. This is also the option. And finally, the use of cullet of waste glass. This is very important in the way that at the moment, once the glass bottles have received a drug, has contained a drug product, it is considered a hazardous material. It has to be burned. Even though glass is infinitely recyclable, once a drug has been inside, it's a hazardous material, cannot recycle anymore. So this has a huge impact on the scope 3 of the glass makers, but also on the pharmaceutical companies. So this is one of the main axes, how to reuse the glass, how to create partnerships, how to develop channels to get that glass back and put it back in the composition. At the moment, we cannot use any other glass from other sources, food and beverages, because that would alter the purity and the properties of the pharma glass. So it's not possible to do that. So that's the main 4 axes of improvement, I would say, with a focus on the improving furnace design and operation, as it's really the important thing. So furnace technology is the key factor that determines the energy consumption and CO2 emission of glass production, as it accounts for about 80% of the total energy demand and 90% of the CO2 emissions. So the furnace technology also affects the quality and performance of the glass, especially in the pharma industry where the requirements are extremely high. So the most common furnace is called end-fired or side-fired furnace, which is used in the glass industry, which use natural gases or oil to run. This type of furnace has a low capital cost, long service life, but also a very high carbon intensity and a low energy efficiency. So not the most optimal to decarbonize. The pharma glass industry mainly uses this type of furnace for producing clear and amber glass. Okay. Then we have the oxy-fuel furnace, So it's an alternative technology that uses pure oxygen instead of air combustion. So this is a great solution for quality product and flexibility, and doesn't consume much energy and CO2. Then we have the fully electric furnace, which is very energy efficient, have a low CO2 emissions, good product quality, but low flexibility in the way you cannot really adapt the production, the pull-out from the furnace. And finally, I would say the most efficient would be the hybrid furnaces, which uses electricity for 80% to heat, to melt the raw materials, and complete the rest by using natural gas or hydrogen. So that's the different options we have at the moment. And just to give you an order of magnitude, not to look really deeply into the figures here, but natural gas is really right now the main source of energy for furnace operations. So we need to increase that part to reduce the carbon footprint. Just an example of usage distribution by energy type, so oxy-fuel versus hybrid, so pure oxygen versus electricity and natural gas. So the oxy-fuel uses 20% of electricity and 80% of fossil fuels, while the hybrid furnace uses more electricity. So hybrid furnace are really, at the moment, why they are technology is still improving, are really the standard for decarbonization. The usage by process. So as you can see, for the oxy-fuel, the furnace and feeders still take up 80% of the energy, while for the hybrid is more like 66%. Yeah. So actually good timing. Yesterday, Arda Group, a glass maker, initiated a construction of a new type of furnace, a revolutionary type of furnace, which will run on 80% of renewable energies. So that's a pilot project started with the help of the European Glass Federation. So this is really furnace technology. All the glass makers have this in mind. Okay, now the case study. So SGD Pharma, so the company I represent here, decarbonization path. So the path to decarbonization is paved with many stones. The two first stones are related to electricity. So strong electrification of the process where it's possible, and the use of green electricity. So you can buy green electricity when it's guaranteed it's produced from renewable energies. In some countries, you have good infrastructures, you have windmills, and you can actually buy renewable energies from your public provider. So this is the first axis of decarbonization, first two stones. Then we have to work also on the furnace and on the energy use. So hydrogen, oxy-combustion, and biogas to replace fossil fuels. The furnace technology evolution to fully electric to hybrid. So this is already in place. Then we have all kind of energy performance improvements all along the process. All our manufacturing sites are certified ISO 50001, which is the ISO standard for energy management. So this is a good direction. And then the development of energy recovery. Another stone is the external cullet rate increase. As I said, at the moment, we cannot really use that as it will impact the purity and the quality of the glass. But in the future, this is where we're heading for, to use external cullet and also decarbonated raw materials only for type 3 glass. And finally, we have the weight reduction. So weight reduction is very linear. If you reduce the weight of the glass bottle without affecting its strength, mechanical resistance properties, then you also reduce on a linear base the carbon footprint of the bottle. So this is also a way to explore. And by applying this industrial transformation plan, we could reach a reduction of CO2 of 65% by 2040 compared to the 2020 baseline. So this is what my company is heading for. And I would say, in terms of investment, is actually extremely capital intensive. I won't give you a precise number, but we're talking nine figures, 80. So for this plan by 2040. Some successful examples taken from our manufacturing sites. So in India, where we have the tubing glass, we produce tubing glass for big pharma companies in the US, in North American market, and also in Asian market, in local market. We had 1 megawatt solar project installation, so which actually makes the clean room run only using these renewable energies. Pretty cool. And in Normandy, so the plant with the ship, we had a few years ago. This is a really new plant. Both plants are very new, but this plant uses a 100% electric furnace. 100% electric furnace. So extremely good score in terms of carbon footprint for this plant. Okay, now we've seen the initiatives. While we look at the challenges, because the path to decarbonization is not without challenges. So the challenges are different in nature. We look at them and look at how to address them. So the first one is the furnace technology. So high temperatures and high purity glass limits the use of low carbon fuels and recycled glass. So how to address that? By having more research and development, by pilot testing, and by demonstrating projects, successful projects to overcome technical difficulties. So this is why the announcement yesterday from the new plant running on renewable energies is very important for that. It's a pilot testing, and this will drive the industry toward this direction or not. Another challenge is the market incentives. So weak and lacking policy support discourage the adoption of low carbon technologies at the moment. How to address that? with more market incentives and policy support to facilitate the transition and reduce the regulatory risk. So as you know, every time you change something as a supplier of the pharma industry, you have a lot of change control, everything needs to be validated again. So this is also a barrier, a challenge to overcome. A third challenge is the energy supply and demand. So energy, there is an uncertainty and volatility that is affecting the availability and affordability of low carbon fuels. Also, you cannot rely always on renewable energies to run your operations, as it is volatile. So how to address that with a more robust and resilient energy systems and supply chain to ensure a reliable and cost-efficient supply of low carbon fuels or energies. And finally, and maybe the biggest challenge of them all, is the end-of-life treatment of pharma glass bottles. As I said, really, this counts for the scope 3, not only of the manufacturers, but also for the pharma companies. And this is really heavy. So this can only be addressed through the development of partnerships with the pharmaceutical companies, with also the competition, with authorities, with all stakeholders involved in this operation, to have a better control of the value chain. And this is actually the next slide, working on the partnerships and on the industry initiative promoting sustainability. So this represents the materiality analysis of a glass maker. You have different types of stakeholders. So in Europe, we have the FEVE, which is the European Container Glass Federation. We also have suppliers which supply so raw materials, energy, have local communities, local and national authorities. We have manufacturing, so this is our plant, this is our resorting facility. We have a network of agents and distributors, patients, so individual care homes, hospitals. And we have customers, so the pharma company, the healthcare company. And here you can see that the product end of life so should be collected and sorted by origin and type. But at the time being, infectious medical wastes are non-recyclable. They are considered waste heat valorization. But at the time, they are not non-recyclable. So based on that materiality analysis, stakeholder analysis, we could see some partnerships emerging between the different stakeholders. And this is the case. So this year, the FEVE, the European Glass Federation, started a working group on the end-of-life study with two of our European competitors, so Bormioli Pharma in Italy and Stolze Glass in Austria, to actually work on those development of the channels to get the glass back. Another one is the PDA, the creation of the PDA Sustainability Steering Committee to engage decision makers and provide insights. So I'm a new member of this committee. I joined that committee 1 month ago, and it's full of high-level decision makers that are driven not only in their job, but personally driven by this climate change issue. And it's actually a very impactful operation. And then we have, for instance, the PSCI, the Pharmaceutical Supply Chain Initiatives, which purpose is to build a responsible value chain and help suppliers, so including glass makers, meet the industry requirements. So that means the efforts to decarbonize cannot be done alone. A company has control on their direct operations, what's happening in their plant, but after that, what's happened before and what's happening after, they need to collaborate, either with the suppliers, with the customers, with the competitors. So the path to decarbonize the glass industry has to be done collaboratively. That's maybe the key message here. And another maybe conclusion to conclude the presentation and to say if there is one thing to take away from that, I would say that pharmaceutical companies are moving in, or every big corporation is moving in the same direction today toward reducing their carbon footprint. And to do that, they have to engage their value chain and all their suppliers. And the key message here is the glass makers are ready to follow and are ready to support. So thank you for your attention, and thank you. If you have any questions?
Thank you, Massine. Any questions?
Sure.
Hi there, Massine. Thank you very much for that. I understood from your presentation that a lot of initiatives are being taken to sort of change the source of the energy in order to improve the carbon footprint. Within the process, you mentioned technical changes, but what technical changes are you looking at that might reduce the energy footprint and the amount of energy that's used to produce glass?
So could you please go down on the notes on this slide? Just give me 1 sec. I'm going on the right slide. Yeah, that's a very good question, actually. So here, would you mind just, yeah. Okay, amazing. Thank you very much. So in terms of optimizing, for instance, we said the processes and the raw materials. So one example of that is, for instance, reducing losses in the forming and in the melting and finishing stages. So optimizing the glass thickness and shape, minimizing defects and breakages, improving the annealing and tempering processes, and using only just best available technologies, latest state-of-the-art equipment, is, general energy efficiency. I would say also maybe optimizing the batch and melting processes, for instance, using preheated cullet. So when you use your own internal cullet, you don't need the same energy input to reach the temperature you want. So using internal cullet is also one of the raw material and processes that would affect the decarbonization. What else? We can talk about also adjusting the batch composition and size, enhancing the heat transfer between transfer and mixing in the melt. So that's really focuses on the forming stage, on the melting stage. Yeah, that's what I have.
Thank you, Massine. You mentioned that electricity was not as flexible as other sources, which I didn't understand very well why, but the electricity would be an obvious conversion in the sense that you can get it from renewable sources, and increasingly I think it will become available from that. So I didn't understand exactly why it was low flexibility. And my second question was, a process like this that involves such high temperatures, and is there a way of doing it in continuous, intensifying the process in a way that you use also less mass, and like we are doing in other, like chemistry, right? Continuous blending, but I meant actually this melting process being done in continuous instead of a batch.
You're right. Maybe I didn't explain that well, or maybe I'm not familiar with the concept you're using right now. But I think, yeah, we do actually continuous batching because the furnace has the same level. It's not one batch. We take raw materials, we put them in the furnace, we melt them, then we take another. It's absolutely continuous. So it's automatically managed. So the silos, the raw materials inside the silos are weighted, and they are just conveyed in the furnace to reach the same level. So it's continuous, actually. Yeah. And for the electricity, that's a very good comment. So I'm not saying it's not flexible in terms of temperature variation. So the electric furnace that we uses electrodes to heat the glass, but I would say it's not flexible in terms of pull-out, how much glass you can pull out of the furnace. So if you want to increase your production of bottles, I would say you have to increase the pull-out. I think the electric furnace is not as flexible as other types of furnace. So it is to that regard that it's not flexible. But what did you mean? You talked about temperatures or you talked about quantity?
I meant that it would be probably the only disadvantage of electricity.
Exactly, yeah. No, you're right.
Okay, thank you, Massine, for a great presentation. I'm going to flip it and take it to the other side, the end-of-life piece.
Sure.
I'm really interested if you've got any ideas or figures on how much material is being recycled and whether or not there are initiatives associated with infectious waste materials as to, if I'm the manufacturer or the originator of, let's say, the end-state material, is the onus then on me to look at that infectious waste, look at the treatment of it, and then put it back in terms of a circular cycle? I just wanted to get your understanding and yeah.
Sure.
Yeah?
So, who has to carry? So, if I understand, let me rephrase, and you tell me if I understand. So, who has to carry the weight, the carbon footprint of the end of life of the bottles? Is that the question?
It's two parts. What data and information do you have?
Yeah. So, at the time being, we're still on the phase to build partnerships, to look for partners, to develop channels to recover the glass, to recycle the glass. So, as I'm telling you, this is really the regulatory environment that makes that. It's not it's because regulations are very strict on waste, especially in Europe, and you cannot recover the glass. So we have in France, we are in a talk with the ADEME, which is the environment agency, the local environmental agency, to actually we have a work group with them, we have a work group with an organization which is called Take a Waste, and which is also looking to recover those kind of hazardous infectious waste. So this is for the first part of the question. We are at the early stage of this approach, but we are actively looking for partners. And as you see, this is also the FEVE is on board, the European Glass Federation. Our competitors are on board. Our European competitors are on board. So this is the early stage, but I'm hopeful because, as you see, people are interested in that, and they want to be part. They want to contribute to be part of that. For the second part of the question, could you remind me what was that again?
The responsibility piece.
So the glassmakers, as the manufacturer of the product, is part of the life cycle of the product. So we carry the weight of the scope 3. It's part of our global footprint. But also the pharmaceutical companies who fill the drug, who fill the bottles and sell them to the market, it also count in their carbon footprint, not as upstream emission, but as a downstream emissions. So they are impacted as well. The carbon accountability is not the same for us and for them, but I'm not saying any names, but I'm based in New York City, and I've met a lot of companies recently in a corporate environment. There is not a single one that has not asked about Scope 3 and what we did to reduce our carbon footprint. I've read their CSR report, their ESG report, and they all have ambitious targets to reduce. For instance, not saying the name, but one of the top 3 pharma companies in the world has a target to engage 64% of their suppliers to have carbon neutral SBTI target. So SBTI means science-based target, means a target in following the Paris Agreement conclusion. So this company has the own target to, to involve 64% of their suppliers to have a SBTI. So for them, it's a very material, very significant topic. So yeah, that counts for us and for them, I would say. Yeah.
Thank you very much for this presentation. I just wanted to make a comment, because you said by law it's not allowed to recycle the glass that has been used for pharmaceuticals. And you also mentioned that you melt the glass to 1600 degrees.
Yes, sir.
Now, I lived in Basel, not far from the furnace where they incinerated the Seveso dioxins, which was at a much lower temperature than you melt your glass. Mm-hmm. There was absolutely nothing that contaminated Basel in Switzerland. And so to throw the glass into your furnace, there is nothing, absolutely nothing left. So it's, in my view, it's political. It has nothing to do with science, but it's just a comment. Thank you.
Thank you. I wish we could proceed like that, but our customers would be very critical of look at the composition. I know, but yeah, I'm convinced. You have to convince them.
Great. Well, thank you, Massine.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you very
thanks
much.
for a great presentation.